Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Before we start this upload, I'm just going to get the intro done. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may or may not like what you hear. Last but not least, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The audiobook version is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those links are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? There's a reason why I wanted to not have a drawn-out intro. Because today I received a phone call from a person that I look up to, that I consider one of the best, if not the best, investigators of cryptid activity. I certainly know he's been doing it for a very long time, and I'm talking about Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker. I hadn't spoken to him for a couple months now. He was in the middle of a big move, and just received a random call from Tim today, and it was great. I talked to him a couple times. I know that we are going to do an upload together very, very, very soon, which I'm super excited about, because when I talk to Tim, I get a feeling of like a push. It's a push to kind of make me a better researcher, to really get out on the forefront and just not just scrape away, but really dig. And there's not too many people that actually drive me like Mr. Baker. So today's upload is going to be inspired and dedicated to Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker. And you will soon find out why I said that, because all of what I'm going to talk about today is things that really, really just pop when I talk to Mr. Baker, or when I hear him or hear somebody talk about him. I just get energized and just pumped up again, because there are some times that I just get drained from the drama, the BS, the trolling, or whatnot. And then today, Tim called me and said, we just shot the breeze, and it was great. And it just gave me a new burst of that kind of energy and enjoyment that I sometimes lose, because I just get kind of sucked in. So anyway, here we go. Today's first part of the upload. Back in October, I was driving to work and I saw a UFO. It was a very large UFO, stationary, around 500 yards in the air directly above my vehicle. It was quite an unsettling event, and since that time I've been on the lookout for any more of these objects or crafts. This is where things get strange. About a month later, I was once again driving to work. It was a dark and rural setting. I round a corner into a lighted area that has a few buildings nearby. We, my fiancé and I, are normally alone driving on this highway, this being no exception, when I see a large dog walking quickly up the side of the road on the right. Loose dogs are no strange sight around here, and I was hoping he would not run out into the road in front of us. Then he stopped directly beside the road and stood up. He didn't stand up like a dog rearing up as they sometimes do. No, he stood up like a human and seemed to morph into something else. One minute it was clearly a dog. The next minute it turned into something I had never seen. It was dark, so I couldn't see very much. A few details and outline, but I have never seen anything like it before. It stood probably 4 feet high, and short front arms or legs, a wide, flat head. I couldn't see the lower part of it because the car was passing by and the passenger door blocked it. It stood there watching us go by, and I lost sight of it. Yes, I know, a bear, right? No, this did not look or act like a bear. It didn't look like Bigfoot either. I've looked on the internet for something or anything that resembled it, but to no avail. The closest thing that I've seen was a dogman or werewolf, but it didn't quite look like that either. It didn't seem aggressive or violent, and I didn't get the feeling of ill will or I was in danger. It just looked curious. If someone were to tell me this story, I would probably dismiss it or think they were crazy. But I did see it. Neither my fiance or myself do drugs or have a history of mental illness. I'm retired from the military, so I've been around and seen a few things, but nothing like this. I have heard of UFO sightings that have been linked to shapeshifters or Bigfoot sightings, but always dismissed it as crazy or people trying to cash in on the UFO phenomenon. Now I'm not so sure. Today's second part, I'd like to touch basis on a little bit of the 411 government cover-up cryptid involvement. For the people who don't know, missing 411 is a phenomenon which hundreds, if not thousands of people go missing in natural parks without a trace with strange circumstances. This particular case that I want to bring to attention is Dennis Lloyd Martin. Dennis was a 6-year-old boy. Him and his father, along with other family members, visited the Great Smoky Mountain National Park in 1969. The particular area within the national park is called Spence Field, within the Tennessee area. Dennis and his brother played hide-and-seek with other family members' kids. The area was close to a tree line. Dennis' father saw Dennis crawl into the bush, as he knew his boys enjoyed hiding and jumping out and scaring each other. A while later, Dennis' father noticed that all of the boys' friends were done playing and moved past the bush that Dennis was hiding in. Mr. Martin ran to the bush in a hurry. Dennis was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Martin claimed that he never took his eyes off his kids, but this is unlikely. Mr. Martin ran at least 2 miles looking for his son, while getting the grandfather to alert the park rangers. 2 hours later, and 5 miles from the disappearance, a separate family known as the Key family is enjoying their day at the park looking for bear. The family heard a scream and described it as the most sickening scream, and the youngest of the Key family pointed out to what he thought was a bear in the brush. His dad said that's not a bear because it's on 2 legs, and said it was a man. He described the man as big, rough-looking Shaggy, and in fur. This was a few years after the famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage, so the term Bigfoot probably wasn't used to describe these beings. Most people would rather refer to them as wild people or hairy men. And the most important detail about the Keys family encounter, beside the description of the man, was that the creature appeared as if it had something red slung over its shoulder. Dennis was wearing a red shirt when he disappeared. The creature was actively evasive and tried to hide from the Key family. The Key family did not know about Dennis's disappearance at this point, and they left the area of their encounter after being scared. The search continued for young Dennis. Rainstorms constantly made things worse as tracks of any kind were washed away. It rained constantly after his disappearance. Hope was lost as weeks passed. The FBI later stepped in to investigate more. Now this is the biggest giveaway that the government knew what they were dealing with. After the involvement of the FBI, Green Beret were sent in. Nobody knows who deployed the special forces. And to this day, the government ignores freedom of information requests. The Green Beret went against park rangers and did not collaborate with the FBI. They established their own radio lines, and they went into the park operating solely on their own with weapons. You don't send Green Beret all the way from Fort Bragg to search for a missing child. Instead, you send special forces to hunt and kill something. I personally believe that the government knew that this creature took Dennis Martin away. It's possible that the creature snapped the poor boy's neck as soon as he was abducted, which explains why he didn't scream. I don't believe that all of these creatures are violent, but certain circumstances could cause them to act as such. The Native Americans have generation upon generations of stories about these creatures taking people way before the establishment of the English colonies. And if you think about it, Bigfoot would be more populated in national parks since there is no deforestation. The land is abundant and is not in any kind of threat. The true tragedy is that this boy's true fate is being covered up because nobody would visit national parks if they knew that a creature could kill or abduct them. Some say Dennis's father was told what really happened to his son, but I don't think he was given the true story, unfortunately. Mr. Martin passed away back in 2014. Can't imagine the heartbreak he went through. All of that could have been avoided if the government told the truth, assuming these creatures are as physically adapted to their environment. It's not uncommon for a creature to run 5 miles in 2 hours with Dennis's body. Something I forgot to mention, the park rangers also said that the Key family's encounter was irrelevant, despite the creature carrying something red over its shoulder. We're going to stay in this general topic for the third part of the upload, the unsolved disappearance of Christopher Tompkins. January 25th, 2002, Christopher Tompkins went to work. A 20-year-old Christopher was said to be fairly religious, well-liked, and generally a happy guy. He lived with his mom in Georgia. At 8 in the morning, he left his home, heading to his survey company job. He parked his car near the office and rode with a coworker to the job site in Ellerslie, Georgia. There were 4 men working on the crew that day. They were working in line formation, each man about 50 feet apart from the next. They broke for lunch around noon and quickly were back to work on the line. Around 1, one of the co-workers, none of them were named, was talking with Chris. When he turned his head to complete a task, he continued to talk with Chris. When he had no response, after a minute, he looked back and saw no sign of Chris. At first, he thought he might have stepped away to use the bathroom in the woods, but he called out several times with no answer. Finally, he summoned the other guys, and they walked down to look for him. When they arrived at his work area, they found all his tools lying around. Further investigation uncovered one of Christopher's boots hanging off the top of a nearby barbed wire fence. After not seeing Christopher anywhere, they called 911 to report his missing. Some facts of the search: the police refused to search until 24 hours had passed since Christopher was legally an adult. Chris's mom also worked for the survey company owner as a babysitter. She was upset and she was not notified of Christopher's disappearance until after 4 p.m., when it was just after 1 when they called 911. The police searched the next day uncovered a piece of fabric torn from Christopher's work pants and 12 cents nearby. The media did not take up on this case well, and the family had to fight for exposure. The co-workers were never named a suspect, although 2 had criminal pasts and 1 would go to prison shortly after for a violent crime. 1 also retained a lawyer a week after Chris went missing. The police publicly stated that Chris just likely walked off and started a new life. Christopher's mother believes foul play was involved, and likely by the co-workers. 5 months after Christopher Tompkins disappeared, a local farmer found his other boot in a swampy part of his land. That was about 900 yards from where he disappeared. There's some theories. He left on his own, but why leave a boot hanging on a fence? And how did he get away so quickly without notice? The co-workers were involved in something. A wild animal grabbed him again. Why no noise tracks blood? Bizarre theories that have been named on the internet. Sasquatch, alien abduction, he fell into a portal. The more talked about this case, the more media attention and the higher likelihood of a resolution. What do you guys think happened to Christopher Tompkins? I myself really, truly feel that he quickly went off to probably use the John, like they said, and he was abducted by a Sasquatch. This would explain the missing boots and just, a very, very fast, rapid disappearance. I don't think that there was human involvement on this. So, just in the comment section, what do you guys think? Still on this track for the 4th part of the upload. On June 1st, 1987, 16-year-old Teresa Ann Byer of Fresno, California, went off camping in a rather remote area of Shut-Eye Peak in the scenic Sierra Mountains, approximately 25 miles northeast of Bass Lake. Her companion on this trip was 43-year-old Russell Walsh. It is well known at the time that Walsh was an avid Bigfoot enthusiast. In fact, a self-proclaimed expert on the creature, and too allegedly had embarked out into the wilderness on a quest to find the legendary beast. This is not so strange in itself, as the Sierra Nevada mountains are quite the hot spot for that kind of activity, with Welsh even claiming he had seen them several times in the region. But it was a bit weird that he believed he was in actual continuous contact with a whole group of them, and also perhaps a little odd that Byer's parents would let her go alone camping with a much older man on what many would have considered a crackpot quest. Nevertheless, they went off on their adventure, and only one of them would come back. When Welsh returned to Fresno several days later without Byer in tow, and the girl made no effort to contact her family, he was definitely considered a person of interest in the possible disappearance. When he was questioned by authorities about what had happened, things got a little strange. Welsh at first told the police that she had run away from him out in the wilderness, but then he would change his mind and decide to tell them what really happened, which would prove to be perhaps far weirder than any of the law enforcement personnel present could have imagined. Welsh claimed that during their camping trip they had gone out on a hike to look for the elusive Sasquatch, and that at some point Byer and him had become separated in the thick forest. At that point, Welsh claimed that one of the massive creatures had swooped in and grabbed her and carried her off into the wilderness. It may come to no surprise whatsoever that the police found this pretty hard to swallow, even though the suspect himself seemed to truly believe what he was saying, and sensing that they had a kidnapping or potential murder on their hands, the police immediately descended upon the area where the two had been camping. Yet a full and comprehensive search of the surroundings turned up no trace of Teresa. When authorities grilled Welsh again to try to glean more information, he stood by his story that she had been dragged into the woods by a Sasquatch, adamant that this was what really happened. Sasquatch or not, Welsh was charged with child abduction and the trial was set. While he was waiting to go to court for quite serious charges, Welsh was offered the opportunity to sign a waiver allowing prosecutors to pursue a murder charge in the event that a body was found in exchange for a light 1-year prison sentence in the meantime. Welsh, still apparently believing that Teresa had been truly in fact abducted by the giant hairy creature, promptly refused the deal. In response to this, as well as lack of any concrete physical evidence at all to link him to the vanishing, the charge was dropped just 3 days before the impending trial in order to avoid defying the law of double jeopardy, which forbids a suspect of being charged twice for the same crime. In this case, meaning his release would allow authorities to later charge him with the more serious charge of murder in the event that the body was discovered. It was thought that the trial for kidnapping at the time could not be won on such a flimsy evidence, and even if a body was not found, the child abduction charges could eventually be reinstated, although he would likely only get the maximum of 4 years for a lesser crime, if they could even make it stick at all, since no body has ever been found, and indeed Teresa has never been heard from again, and no real evidence other than suspicious existence to hold Welsh. He remains a free man. As to the victim herself, there has been absolutely no sign of her, and oddly, Welsh has always maintained that she was really in fact kidnapped by a Sasquatch, which of all the wild stories and excuses he could attempt to weave seems like an odd choice, at the very least. Indeed, his instance on the outlandish tale has caused some people to wonder if there is any chance he could possibly be telling the truth. Welsh must have known that not only would no one believe him, but that this far-out yarn would cause him to look even more suspicious. But he stuck to this surreal version of events anyway. Why would that be? He could have simply told the police that Teresa had wandered off hiking and never came back, or that she had been injured. So why talk about the bizarre tale of a Bigfoot abduction? Does not make any sense. There is also the fact that there are actually quite a few reports of people being allegedly kidnapped by Bigfoot, which has been covered numerous times. For instance, the 1924 case of Albert Ostman, who claimed that he had been carried off by a Sasquatch as he slept, bundled in his own sleeping bag. He would then say that he had been kept captive for nearly a week by a whole family of the creatures before managing to escape. In 1928, there was also the account of a Nootka Native American man named Muchalat Harry, who also alleged that he was dragged off and held captive by a group of these creatures before getting away while they were distracted. Both men would spend the remainder of their lives terrified of going into the woods and fully insist that their stories were true. And there are quite a few more such reports. Alright guys, so what do you think happened to Teresa? It's messed up, because I myself immediately want to question the parents and ask them, what kind of parent are you to allow your child to go camping with a middle-aged man? It's just a red flag, a very big red flag. Maybe they paid this guy to, bring her out in the woods and kill her. But, I don't know, part of me doesn't buy that either, The guy remained adamant, even when he was forced to look at a large prison sentence and then brought it down to 1 year. That's, pretty crazy. Even if you weren't guilty or whatever, it's got to be scary enough to, get pulled in. So, anyway, I just want to comment on that a little bit, that I definitely feel that Teresa was definitely abducted by something other than a human. Today's final part of the upload. The area of El Dorado Canyon in Nevada has long and colorful history. The original home for many Mojave tribes of Native Americans, the area gained a reputation for being a land of vast reserves of gold, which is one of the reasons that the Spanish conquistadors came pouring into the wild place to try to conquer it. The Spanish were not ever able to find the legendary veins of gold they were looking for, but this would not stop people from trying well into later centuries. By the mid-1800s, an influx of gold prospectors were finding their way into the region to pan the Colorado River, and with the news of gold being found, the stream of prospectors increased. They would eventually hit upon the mother lode, when in 1861 a substantial vein of gold called the Salvage vein was found in an area, and mines were beginning to pop up left and right, including the famous Techtee mine owned by California Senator George Hearst, father of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst. It was to become not only a place of history, but also one with its fair share of paranormal phenomenon, not the least of which are its supposed phantom hellhounds. All of these miners, with greedy visions of striking it rich, elbowing for space on the same land, were bound to cause problems, and there were. With many of these men not exactly the most outstanding citizens, including outlaws, Civil War deserters, and other various dregs of society. It was only natural that this would become somewhat of a lawless place, a den of villainy, with gunfight disputes and a casual murder here and there, made all the more intense by rivalries forming between northern and southern sympathizers during the Southern War, as well as raids carried out by Native Americans. It got so bad that even lawmen did not come here, and the rowdy miners were more or less left to their anarchy and lawlessness, and left to kill themselves off. The only real attempts to maintain peace was the occasional step-in of federal troops coming to break up particular nasty disputes. There would eventually be a military outpost permanently stationed there, if only to protect the heavy steamboat traffic that passed along the Colorado River. Yet, even in the face of all the violence, many of the prominent mines were making money hand over fist, with the Techtee mine alone producing more than $2.5 million worth of gold, silver, copper, and lead by the time it closed in 1945. It is perhaps not surprising that, with such a turbulent history of conflict and death, that there should be numerous ghost stories from the canyon, but among these are strange tales of what seem to be demonic hounds that prowl the wilds. There have been many accounts of snarling canine apparitions from here along the long abandoned mines and feral ghost towns, and these are largely said to be the spirits of the ferocious dog miners once used to protect their claim. Back in the days, everyone was stabbing each other in the back looking for a move on the claim, so miners employed highly vicious dogs to guard their mines. Many of these dogs did not fare well, either shot by trespassers or simply left abandoned to die when the miners moved on after the gold dried up. And it is thought that these animals remain as ghosts, still guarding the treasure that no longer exists. One such sighting of the hellhounds comes from the Shadowland site, from a witness who claimed to have gone to the area with his brother to investigate the claims of these apparitions. He did not come away disappointed. The witness says for many years people have come out of the canyon with tales of sightings, and in very few instances terrifying accounts of actually being attacked or chased by these ghost dogs while exploring various different mining or town sites in the area. Curious as the validity of such tales, my brother and I made a decision to do a little exploring on our own. On the first few excursions, we found nothing as was expected. However, on the last adventure, we stumbled onto what we thought was just another anonymous shaft site. As we looked closer at the site, we noticed about an 8-foot, severely weathered chain embedded into the rock wall at the entrance of the shaft. Well, curiosity got the better of both of us, and foolishly we entered the shaft. There we came upon the bones of what seemed to be one of those large dogs. We decided to camp here as the day was slowly coming to its end. The decision that we later regret. The still desert night closed in as we had dinner and relaxed around our small campfire. We heard what we assumed as coyotes yipping and calling off in the distance. The atmosphere became thick and very uneasy. We now felt that we were being watched from a very close distance. What we thought was the nighttime breeze now sounded more like panting of a very large dog or dogs in close proximity. Then we heard growling, grating low and hateful. The fall of paws on the desert sand now became apparent. They seemed to circle our campsite. We were surrounded. That's when the scratching started. It came from the area where the chain was. The damn chain started to move. It seemed to tug away from the rock wall, pulling harder and harder each time. We fumbled with our gear and stumbled to our feet. My brother shone the flashlight at the chain. There were scratch marks in the rock. There were what appeared to be bloodstains on the wall, seemingly where the unfortunate dog ferociously clawed at the chain base and the rock itself. The chain dropped, something brushed against my leg, and I struggled to keep my balance. My brother caught me, and we ran toward the car. The fall of canine footsteps and wild panting chasing behind us. I've never ran so fast in my life. On the road, heading out of the canyon, we were paced for a good 2 or 3 miles, at least by what seemed to be a pack of wild dogs. We made it home, and I will never forget the terror of being chased by this pack of spectral hellhounds. Another one of these accounts. I was with my buddies for a fun weekend, setting up camp and seeing ghost dogs in our camp. We spent the day on our bikes and off-road trucks four-wheeling till about 6. While cooking dinner, my buddy Paul said he saw a coyote crouching in a defensive stand. My other friends, Helen and Mike, said they hadn't seen anything and they were right next to him. After the hot dogs were done and everybody was fed and watered, we started a campfire and settled down before we went to bed. I'd say it was 9:15. We all saw this large shadow of a dog on the tent wall. Helen screamed, and when she did, the shadow disappeared. Here is one more such account of these hellhounds of El Dorado. About 12 years ago, my son and his wife were visiting for their third honeymoon. They rented an older boat and drifted along. Around 2 in the morning, my house phone rang off the hook with my son frantically shouting that they had just seen a mutant dog with a piercing howl attempting to catch a duck. For the details, as a 4-legged, mangy mutt with terrifying overlapping teeth. He said the dog failed to catch the ducks and ran off hungry when they shined the flashlight onto the shore. Was this a spirit, a phantom, a cryptid of some sort, or just a misidentification of a stray dog? We are left to ask so many questions in all these cases. Is this all pure legend, or is it something more? Alright guys, there's today's upload. I really hope you enjoyed it. Once again, dedicated to Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker. What do I think these things are in the abandoned mining sites out there? Well, you know, they could be some sort of Native American summoned by a shaman, shapeshifter protecting Mother Earth, or possibly a forgotten, leftover, left to die dog from the prospecting days, or killed by another miner. But I'm leaning towards Dogman, like I normally do. So, but that's where I always lead off as, is Dogman. Unless I know it's not, whatever. So, yeah. With that, have a great day, guys. Thanks a lot.